criticism.
In 2018, the gang did a complete ranking of the big three of the slasher mainstream in Freddy, Michael, and Jason. 31 films ranked on the 31st day of October. The first entry in this series featured arguably the premier characters in the mainstream horror world. But for 2019, we decided to get to the next layer down. If not influential for those very big three we focused on just a year earlier. In another instance, we have a bona fide slasher star, who for some reason or another has always been in the B tier. Then we move on to a franchise that has the distinct privilege of having the good guy as the franchise star. The penultimate franchise in this gathering could be responsible for saving mainstream horror outright, while leading our least represented series to even have an existence. Already with another film due soon, this list may not be complete for much longer, but as we come to you on this Halloween 2019, this is 31 on 31, 2019, presented by the Autopstream crew.
Well, it's here, it's that time of year once more. Last year we did 31 on the 31st and we ranked all the movies in the big three. That's Michael, Freddy and Jason. This year we wanted to do it again. So yeah, we've picked a whole bunch of other franchises. Probably what most people would call the B team, although for me, there's a few on here that quite frankly should be the A team. Personally, I think we've got a much stronger list of movies this year, not counting my bottom 8. For those who don't know, 31 on 31st, we take a bunch of horror franchises and we take all those films in each franchise and we rank them. One big ranking video. It causes quite a bit of consternation amongst many people. I had some comments last year, it must be said. But yeah, that's the beauty of it, the difference of opinion. And when you're dealing with so many movies, you have much more, shall we say, of an imbalance compared to other people's lists. It's a lot easier to make things go different ways. So I'm sure my list will be very different to Cody's list and very different CP's list. We've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre, we've got Child's Play, we've got Scream, we've got Psycho, we've got Evil Dead, and we've got The Collector, which is only just making this list because if you don't know, there has been a third film announced. It won't be out by the time this list comes out, so we're still counting it. 2 films in the Collector franchise, so 6 franchises in all. As I say, personally, I think a better collection than last year's, but that's just me. Just remember, Cody Leach is doing one of these. CP of WiliSCREDIA is doing one of these. We were hoping Lindsay, Mother Mayhem, would be doing one, but I don't think she's really doing anything with her channel these days. She's bowing out of it, I believe, this year. But yeah, show her some love anyway, because she is super awesome. But yeah, let's get into it. 31 movies. Starting with number 31, which is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Next Generation. This film is a mess. An absolute mess. It is wacky, it is all over the place, it chucks everything in there, from government conspiracies to a transvestite Leatherface to 2 Oscar-winning actors before their time. One fares much better than the other, it must be said. That being McConaughey. A lot of people who are down on this film are also really down on McConaughey in it. And personally, I think is the best thing in it. He's the only good thing in it. Because he's the only person who knows what film he's in. He's the only one who knows you cannot treat this material with any kind of seriousness. You have to just go full-blown, over the top, and have a bit of a ball with it. He's the only one who seems to know that. So he is enjoyably watchable in this, it must be said. Good? No. But I think even he knows that. It's just, yeah, it is what it is, which is a mess, an absolute mess. It's one of those films you kind of sit there watching it like with this face. At number 30, we've got Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. This is, it probably commits the worst crime in cinema, which is that it's just dull. When I reviewed this, I watched it and then I reviewed it like a week later, recorded my review a week after watching it. And when I came to the review, could not remember anything. Like literally had to go to Wikipedia and read a whole plot synopsis beat by beat just to remember what had happened. Yeah, for me, that's the worst thing a movie can do, is bore you, is be totally unmemorable. Because at least Next Generation, you remember it. I wish I couldn't, but it certainly sticks in the mind. So yeah, 3, the reason it's higher than Next Generation is it is better made. There is a bit more competency in the filmmaking, I think. But it's just dull. It's unmemorable. At number 29, we've got Leatherface. Yeah, the two Leatherfaces stuck side by side. This is the final film in the franchise, but it is the prequel, so it's set before all the others. Once you can work out which film it's actually a prequel to. Yeah, this franchise is all over the place with the timeline, but there you go. It's gnarly. It commits 2 huge sins. One is that it tries to give this backstory to Leatherface, which is totally unrealistic, because we've been led to believe for so long that this guy is just mentally deficient. You know, there is something missing there. He's very childlike, and yet we get this story here in which we follow this guy who's very eloquently spoken, quite intelligent, and goes through some stuff, and we're supposed to believe that that stuff shapes him into Leatherface. No, don't buy it. Not one bit. Totally unbelievable. And the second sin is some really gnarly stuff for the sake of it. A particular sex scene, which... At number 28, and this is where Texas Chainsaw fans really start to curse me out, we've got Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Yep, Tobe Hooper comes back a decade after making his original and makes this, whatever this is, completely different tone to the first film, although Tobe Hooper has always said that the first film was meant to be something of a comedy. I'm afraid that got lost in translation there, mate, because there was nothing funny about that first one. And there's nothing funny about this one, it seems. It's totally over the top. It's got this character called Chop Top, which I find super irritating all the way throughout. I know people really like him, but I just do not. He just irritates me. I want to give him a slap. From start to finish, I just want to slap this guy. Then we have Dennis Hopper in this, who, quite frankly, I do not understand being in this, because at this point, you know, this isn't like one of the Matthew McConaughey, Renée Zellweger, Viggo Mortensen story, where you've got someone making their first film, or, you know, someone who just isn't that big in Hollywood at the time. This is Dennis Hopper. He'd done Easy Rider before this, you know, and several other films that people would regard as pretty high standard. Apocalypse Now, you know. So how he attached his name to this, I don't know, but yeah, he did, and regrettably so, because he's set up as this main character at the beginning, and he teams up with this woman. You think they're gonna take on the family together, and then he just disappears. He just wanders around this place, hacking up wood with a chainsaw for the next 30 minutes while we wait for him to get back on the scene. It's a mess of a film. It's got a really embarrassing ending for the actress, in which she does this kind of moving the chainsaw about, a bit like Leatherface did in the first film. It's supposed to be something, symbolic in some way, or poetic, or whatever. It don't work. She looks embarrassed. She looks silly, waggling that thing around. Yeah, the whole film is about as silly as that sequence. It's not good. At number 27, send in the hate mail. Yes, it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake. Everybody seems to love this film. A lot of horror fans, really big on it. I just don't know that it has anything to say. No, I do know actually. It's got nothing to say. And whenever I ask someone, tell me what the overriding theme is of this film, tell me what it's really trying to say to us, they never give me an answer because it doesn't have anything. It's shallow, it's hollow, it's all surface and there's nothing underneath. You know, like as much as I dislike the rest of the films in the franchise, as much as I dislike the original, it still felt like it had something to say. This one has got nothing. It's all spit and polish. It's all how it looks. It looks great, you know, visually. It's very nicely handled. I think the performances are pretty decent in it. It's just that, yeah, it's not telling me anything. It's showing me lots, but it's not saying a damn thing with it. It's hollow. At number 26, we've got the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There's a pattern here, isn't there? There's definitely a pattern. The original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Now, this is a film that... So don't get me wrong. This isn't at the bottom because I think it's badly made or anything. I do think that what it sets out to do, it does very well. I think if you look at it from the context of the time it was made, there's definitely an undercurrent there of political stuff going on, you know, looking at the effects of Vietnam and things like that on society. And yeah, so it definitely has more of a political edge about it. It definitely has something more to say. I'm just not with this series, I guess. It's not my thing. I think that Tobe Hooper does a really good job of bringing us into a world that maybe we don't want to be in, and ratcheting up the tension from start to finish until it just builds and builds and builds and builds, and then boom, there's your credits. So I get why people would like this. I get why it kind of has that classic status. It's just not my cup of tea. It's not. I don't want to watch it. That's the thing. I don't feel any desire to ever watch it again. It's gnarly, it's dirty, it's grimy. It's not particularly well acted, to be fair, but that's down to a budgetary constraint. But yeah, it's not my thing. I understand why people like this one in particular, but it's just not my thing. Next up at 25, and I think this is probably the first... given where I've just ranked the original TCM, but I would have said this is the first one that's really going to cause some people to spit their dummies out. It's Texas Chainsaw 3D. I know people hate this movie, and I know for a lot of people it would be at the bottom of the list, particularly when it comes to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Those two things it did completely wrong. One is the timeline, you know, the period detail. The period detail does not allow us to believe that it's set where they're asking us to believe it's set. So a bit more attention to that detail would have been nice. And second is the ending. The last 5-10 minutes, not buying it at all. But everything else in that, it has a story. It has something to say. Blood is thicker than water. Does it say it in the best possible way? No, not really. But it has something to say. It's still trying something. It's dealing with a particular theme, which I don't get from a lot of the other movies. I also like Alexandra Daddario. I can't say her name, whatever. I like her in this. I think she's good. She gets some pretty ripe, or not so ripe dialogue to chew on, but she does the best that she can with it. I also like that actually we get rid of most of the family, pretty much all the family at the beginning of the film. We're just left with Leatherface, so we make him the singular solitary threat. Long time coming, really. I've never really liked the dynamic of the family. I find them a bit too gnarly, a bit too grisly. And with every film, you have this setup where somebody goes into this town, and the only people there are the family, and there's no real explanation given in most of the films. So you're just thinking, why is every single person that someone bumps into in this town a member of this family? So yeah, so getting him down to just Leatherface, making this story about the sister, the attachment there. Whose side is she going to choose? Again, could have been handled better, but at least it's got something to say. And at number 24, that's right, you guessed it. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, the only film in this franchise that I would give a 3-star rating to. Everything else, not so much. The original, I think, probably deserves more, just from a technical standpoint. But yeah, again, like I say, too gnarly for me. This one, again, it had something to say. It basically it followed the blueprint that we were given with the remake. In many ways, it's the same film. In many ways, it's just that it takes that remake and says, actually, let's put something in here. Let's give it something thematically. Let's let it have something to say. So yeah, I don't understand why people are so down on this and yet love the remake. It makes no sense to me. I think this one is clearly the better of the two. I don't get how anyone can't see that, to be honest. But there you go. I guess some people prefer style over substance. It's also the first film that really gives us the reasons for why this town is just the family. And I know a lot of people don't need everything explaining. A lot of people don't like prequels because they like the mystery. But some things need explaining, like this being one of them. Because otherwise, it's just bad plotting. It's just coincidence after coincidence, and it's like a contrivance after contrivance, and it's just it gets a bit silly after a while. So at least here, with the explanation they give as to why it's only the family that seem to remain in this town, it allows me to buy into everything else that's going on and not be sat there thinking all the time trying to work out why. So yeah, I like it. I like the dynamic between the two brothers in the film. I think the scares are handled pretty well. It's got a lot of atmosphere. It's clearly the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. For me, I get that that's subjective, but for me, it clearly is. And right now, I know that all the Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans out there have literally probably just switched off and unsubscribed. But there you go. TCM is not my franchise. Now, I know I could have just said, check out my TCM ranking and stick it at the bottom of this list, because that's pretty much what I've done. But there you go. Yeah. Moving on. At number 23, we've got Cult of Chucky. I liked this film, but I've not seen it since the first time I watched it. And the first time I watched it, I hadn't yet seen Bride, Seed, and Curse. I'd only seen the first 3. And even then, it had been a long gap between having seen 1 to 3, and seeing this one. So I liked it. When I watched it, I thought, that's pretty good. I like that. Straight to DVD, but for a straight to DVD release, it's pretty good. It's only after watching all the others again recently and realising that actually the continuity is just crap to the bed, basically. Don Mancini just ignored everything that he'd already written in the previous, 6 films? 5 films? 6? Yeah, it doesn't fit in. It's just like, actually, I can't think how to get there, so I'm just gonna betray and ignore everything I've written in the past. At number 22, we've got Child's Play 3, and before I continue, don't worry. This isn't like TCM. It's not going to be all the Child's Play movies here now. I like some of the Child's Play movies quite a lot, so don't panic. But yeah, Child's Play 3 is at number 22. Great final act. Really great final act. One of the best final acts of the whole Child's Play series, in fact. Really good showdown at the amusement park. It's just that everything else before that is pretty dull and pretty silly. pretty stupid, with characters that I just do not like, cannot stand, are just really annoying. If the first 2/3 had been as good as that last third, it would easily be the best Child's Play film, but it's not, so it isn't. The number 21 is Seed of Chucky. Now, any keen observers out there who are aware of the Chucky ranking that I did sometime this year, around the release of the remake, will know that Seed of Chucky was actually pretty high in that ranking. And yeah, I've seen it again since. Now, I don't want to make excuses, but when I did that ranking video, confession time, I was going through depression. I'd just started taking antidepressants. I wasn't in a particularly good place. I don't think you can tell that on the video. When you do these videos, you just get into your rhythm, I guess. And yeah, but if you know me, if you're part of my personal life, you will know that I wasn't in a good place at the time that I made that ranking. And when I watched Seed of Chucky and Child's Play 2, Seed of Chucky was higher than Child's Play 2. I got a lot of flack for it, but I don't think my head was in the right place. I didn't need something serious. I needed something stupid, wacky, and for what, yeah. I think that's the reason, that's the excuse anyway that I'm giving. I watched it again recently. I also watched Child's Play 2 again recently, just before doing this list, because I wanted to be sure. I wanted to get them nailed down. Watching it again, yeah, it ain't as good as I remember. I still don't quite get the level of hatred it has. Yes, it is completely wacky. It is completely nuts. It's just, it goes for the humour. In the same way that Army of Darkness does. You know, if you look at the Evil Dead franchise, there's a gradual progression there of going from dark, fairly serious, to totally whacked out humour. No one ever seems to complain about that, and yet they do so with the Chucky franchise. I still had fun with it. There are some moments in it where they're a bit cringy, and I'm like, oh, did we really need to see Chucky masturbating? But then there's other lines of dialogue that just come out of nowhere that crack me up, genuinely. Like the bit at the beginning when Glenn/Glenda is thinking about wherever his parents might be, and he's wondering what they might be, and he thinks they're in Japan, so he's like questioning whether or not they might work for the Emperor and things like that. It was just his wacky line that just came out of nowhere and caught me off guard, and it made me laugh. And the delivery by Billy Boyd as well, I thought was pretty good. But there are moments in this, some wacky moments that I find entertaining. It's not highbrow entertainment, don't get me wrong. It's, you know, it's not going to be winning any awards for script writing, that's for sure. It's stupid, but it's stupidly fun as well. And it's got some of the gnarliest kills of the franchise as well. The bit with John Waters, is that his name? John Waters, the director, which was quite surprised to see him in there. But yeah, his death scene is pretty gnarly. So yeah, it's got the kills. It's got an abundance of humour. Oh, balls. So it's got the kills, it's got an abundance of humour, some of it not so great, but yeah, I have fun with it, and I still just don't, I don't quite understand the hate, I really don't. I get it if you prefer your Child's Play movies to be a bit more serious, but they've never been that serious. At the end of the day, you know, they've always played on the humorous side of Chucky, so yeah, they just dial it up to 10 here. I'm fine with it. At number 20, we've got Curse of Chucky. I think you're probably starting to panic now, because I did say that it's not all just Chucky films, but it is looking like it is, isn't it? Curse of Chucky, this is probably the darkest of the bunch, of the Chucky movies, that is. I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. I wasn't overly keen on some obvious jabs at religion by Don Mancini. I know he's got a bit of a beef. You don't want no beef. You don't want no beef. Against religion, or particularly organised religion, whatever. But yeah, he lets that show here, I think, more than at any other point in the series. But beyond that, it is a pretty decent little thriller. It's like I say, it's got a dark edge. It's much darker. Brad Dourif's daughter is in this, and she's pretty good. She proves herself to be a pretty decent actress. I like the tone. You know, as much as I just said that I thought Seed of Chucky was good, I do prefer a darker edge to the Chucky films. I'm not adverse to it. I like the confined nature of it as well. It all takes place in this one house. It's one big house. I think a lot of that might be down to budgetary constraints, but the location is used well. Mancini does a pretty good job. It's just a shame that, yeah, he then went and did Cult. He's all over the place, basically, this dude. Mancini's just like, he's up and down. It's almost like he wakes up one morning, has an idea and just runs with it. Doesn't decide whether it's good or bad. He just, whatever he's thinking that morning, boom, writes it, cranks out another Child's Play film. So it's all down to whatever mood he's in that day, I guess. But yeah, this is definitely one of the better of the bunch, and I think it's because it treats the subject matter seriously. It goes pretty dark, and it's got a good central performance from Dourif. At number 19 is Bride of Chucky. That's it for a bit, I promise. Yeah, Bride of Chucky. It's good. I was expecting it to be a bit better, only because before I saw it, Bride of Chucky seemed to be the one that everyone like really raved about when it came to the Chucky movies. I think it definitely has an influence of Scream about it. You know, Scream came along at the end of the 90s and really changed the landscape of horror movies, particularly slasher movies. You know, they became very self-aware, very postmodern. And this does take a bite out of that apple. I think it fares pretty well for the most part. Definitely a shift in tone in Bride of Chucky compared to the first three, which is another reason I don't understand the level of hatred for Seed. A lot of people say, it just ruined it with all the ridiculous humour. That was in Bride as well, to be honest. I don't see that big a leap, to be honest, from Bride to Seed. I think the two of them they're not like really distant cousins in tone. Personally, I think when I watch them, I think anybody who's got just as much reason to dislike Bride's tone when you look at the first three as they have to dislike Seed. I do definitely think Bride is the better of the two. It's a bit more consistent. It has a bit more of a through line, a solid story that it's following. But yeah, it's not Citizen Kane. You know, it's still Don Mancini we're dealing with here, who's on writing duties. But yeah, I liked it. It was good. It was solid. It was fun. Little break now. Those Child's Play fans will be pleased to know. We're going with a different franchise. Number 18. Army of Darkness, Evil Dead 3. I don't dislike this film. I have fun with it. It is quite humorous, but I think it goes too much for that side of things. I think the tone here is maybe even more of a shift for this franchise than what Seed was for Child's Play. It's Three Stooges level. You know, it's proper slapstick stuff. For about 2 hours. I appreciate a lot of it, certainly from Bruce Campbell's standpoint. He certainly throws himself around a bit. There's some wacky effects, and I do like the setting. It kind of becomes more of a fantasy film rather than a horror film. You know, I think about films like Krull from the 80s. It kind of fits that vibe and whatnot. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. But yeah, in this case, it's not the best thing. I like the fantasy element. I don't like the abundance of slapstick humour. It just lets it down a bit for me. Still a solid film, still like it, but when you look at what came before, it's a bit of a letdown. It's a bit of a step down. And number 17, sorry once again, Child's Play fans, it's the remake from this year. I've only seen this film once, and out of all the films on this 31 list, this is the one that I can very much imagine going up, and probably considerably, on a second viewing. Unfortunately, it's not been released over here yet on Blu-ray or anything like that, so there's no real way for me to get a second watch in before making this list. But I think there's a lot of meat on its bones. Now the tone of it, the character of Chucky in this, I'm not as fond of him as I am of the Charles Lee Ray version from the original Child's Play. It takes some getting used to. But having said that, of all the Child's Play films, I think this is definitely the one that has the most to say. It's a very good commentary on parenting, on bad parenting, on the responsibility of parenting. You know, you look at Andy's mum in this. She wants to be her son's best friend, and that ain't always the best kind of form of parenting. Yes, we should be friends with our kids, but when that comes at the at the risk of not doing what you should be doing with your kid, not teaching them the things you should be teaching them, leaving them to go off watching horror films with their mates, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, at the tender age that he's at. It's just, it doesn't give him the best kind of responsible adult figure to look up to. And as a result of that, he also, as a child, isn't very good at parenting what is essentially his new child in the form of this Chucky doll. And we see the way that Chucky essentially looks up to this kid as his parent. And when he's given bad parenting, it's then that he goes off the rails. So the whole film just, it plays as a very good commentary about bad parenting. There's a few things about it that kind of, I wasn't overly sold on, but it's stuck in the mind, I think. More than any of the other Child's Play films, it's kind of, it's still lodged there. I still think about it. So again, as I say, for now it sits at 17. But of all films on this list, I repeat, this is the one I can very much imagine going up. At number 16, we've got Psycho 4, The Beginning. It's a prequel. It tells us things or shows us things that we kind of already knew or were insinuated in some way. So I know Cody is of the mind that he just doesn't need to see that. He doesn't care. I understand that. I get why. Normally I'm of that mindset. But I still think this film does a pretty good job. It's a made-for-TV movie. They've got a considerably lower budget than usual. But I think they do a good job with it. I do. Norman Bates is just an intriguing character to me. He's my favourite character out of all of these movies. There's just something about him that, you can sympathise with him. You can't condone anything he does, but it's kind of not his fault in many ways. You know, he's not in control. So he is that strange character that you fear but also sympathise with. So I think this film, again, we wouldn't miss it if it wasn't there, for the reasons that I just stated, that Cody's reasons. But I like it. I like that it is there. If I'm making my way through the Psycho movies, I'll stick this on. I'll watch 1 to 4 and the remake. Actually, I like them. This is no different. So, yeah. I think it does a good job of dealing, again, with those themes of nature versus nurture. That's really what the film is all about, because he's on this radio show. Norman Bates is on this radio show talking about essentially what makes a killer. Was it his upbringing? Was it the parenting? For again, a bit like the Child's Play remake. You've got that discussion there about the role of the parent, but was it his parenting? Was it the fact that his mother was one fruit short of a basket, or is it part of his genes? Is it part of his genetic makeup? Does he have no choice in that regard? So yeah, I think he does a pretty good job of discussing that, of looking at that, and it gives us some catharsis as well, I think, for the character of Norman Bates. You know, towards the end of the film, when he confronts his demons and kind of overcomes them, it's a nice ending for the character. So Psycho 4, better than some would give it credit for. At number 15, it is Scream 3. I know CP says this in his video. I have managed to see his video before the rest of you. Yeah, like he said, if Scream 3 is the worst film in your franchise, you're doing pretty well. And he's right. Scream 3 it's certainly not the best of the franchise. It's the bottom of the 4. But when you stack it up against other horror series, damn, it's pretty good, So yeah, Scream does a really good job of keeping that consistency. I think the fact that Kevin Williamson wasn't on board with script writing duty on this one really let it down a bit, really made it suffer. Aaron Kruger does a good job, but he just doesn't have the same style. Scream has a very particular style to it, and that's not Aaron Kruger's style. I think Kruger does more believable dialogue, but what you need in a Scream movie isn't necessarily believability. It's that postmodern edge, that kind of knowing wink, and Williamson does that better than anybody, really, with the exception of Tarantino, perhaps. But yeah, it's still a good, solid slasher film, possibly a bit too long for what it is, and very convoluted. And my next two choices they're like that. They're interchangeable depending on what day I'm on. It could change, but for today, I'm going to go with at number 14, Scream 4. It's a film that I didn't like first time I watched it. When it came out, I don't know. I had a patch during the late noughties where I'd kind of veered away from horror for a few years, to be honest. And I think Scream 4 hit around the time that I'd done that veering away. And I watched it and I was just a bit like, yeah, whatever. I felt like I'd seen it all before, and I was just, I don't know, I wasn't in it. I wasn't feeling it. And I stayed away from the film for a considerable amount of time until, yeah, my buddies, Cody, CP, Lindsay, all them lot, they were adamant that, yeah, Scream 4 was a good film. So I checked it out again, and yeah, they were right. I was in a funky mood. It happens sometimes when you see a film. It's why I'm a proponent of the second watch. Yeah, this definitely improved on the second and indeed the third watch. It's a very good film. Williamson is back, and yeah, all the better for it. It's I think it's let down a little bit by who the killer, and well, not necessarily who the killer ends up being, although I could see that coming, but just I think the final act, once it's revealed and the killer does the whole Scooby-Doo speech, I would have gotten away with it too, that with you pesky kids, and just like banging on about why they did what they did. Just kill them already, okay? Stop talking, get stabbing. The final showdown, so to speak, in which still all of our main protagonists that have been with us throughout this franchise still survive. Really at this point you couldn't have killed at least one of them at this point. That didn't sit very well with me, to be honest. But Scream 4, still a great film. Everything else that precedes that final act is really good stuff. Williamson is back on form, Craven is back on form, and it's highly entertaining. If you like the first two Scream movies, there's no reason I think you shouldn't like this one. Number 13, we've got Psycho 3. It kind of takes many of the elements from Psycho 1 and 2, mashes them together, and creates something that isn't quite as good as either. But as a Psycho fan, it's still a really good, solid entry. It still has a lot more going on in it than the average slasher flick. I think it does kind of fall into a lot of the trappings of 80s slasher movies. I think it tries to mould itself too much into one of those movies to fit, what was clearly successful at the time. But I don't think it needs to be that. You look at the first two movies, they have much more of that thriller, character-driven element. And I think, sticking with that would have been the way to go. Having said that, despite a particular female character in it that doesn't seem to go anywhere, it looks like she is. It looks like they're going to do something with her character, and then they kind of don't at the end. Despite that, again, I still like Norman Bates. I still like the journey he goes on here. There is a particular level of catharsis for him here, but not quite the level of what he gets in part 4. Anthony Perkins is still on form. It's probably his weakest performance as Norman Bates, but he is on directing duty as well, so I think that had a lot to play into why his performance ain't quite up to snuff when compared with the other movies in the franchise. But no, I like it. I have fun with this one. There's a lot going on, a lot of superfluous stuff, but out of the 4 originals, it's probably the one that I can stick on and just for fun. I'm just going to stick it on. I don't need to think. I'll just have a bit of fun with Psycho 3. And like I say, it's still better than your average slasher sequel. Let's face it, slashers aren't synonymous with putting out really great sequels. They're kind of few and far between. At number 12 is Psycho, the 98 remake. Obviously not the original. Yes. A film that I only went back to for the first time since originally seeing it this year for my review. I was dreading it. Didn't want to watch it. I was like, what is the point? But watched it, and my opinion completely changed. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I think it is a interesting exercise in, take the original script, take the original way it was shot, match it up completely, and see what changes. And it does show that even with the same brilliant script, even using the same shots, you don't quite get the same level of filmmaking because it is down to that talent. And Norman Bates, the biggest thing about this film that is I say a detractor, is Norman Bates. Vince Vaughn. I like Vince Vaughn. I think he's done some good work as a serious actor. This was one of his first serious movie roles. He doesn't fare that well in it. The biggest sin, I think, personally, of this film is that it turns Norman Bates into a creep that we don't like from the start, and that we know from the start there is something off with this guy. And that's because of that performance and the way it's handled by Gus Van Sant. The extra little bits that Van Sant chucks in there, the masturbation scene, again, that takes away the childlike innocence or kind of, not innocence, but the childlike curiosity of Norman Bates that was in the original, and turns it into something seedy, something dirty, something creepy. And because of that, Norman Bates comes out of this film as a completely different character. So it is interesting. It is interesting to look at that. I prefer the way it's handled in the original, but again, I think there's value. There is value in taking this approach that Gus Van Sant has taken and just seeing what changes. How does it change? Just those little things. You can make the same film, but just with a slight difference, and it completely changes everything. So, it's nowhere near as good as the first one. It wouldn't be here without the first one, but on many technical levels, it is better than the first one, mostly because of the innovation of technology, not really down to any talent as much that Van Sant has over Hitchcock. It's still a solid film. I like it. I enjoyed it a lot more this time around, and I appreciate it for what it is. At number 11, we've got Child's Play 2. Again, I will reiterate, if you see my ranking video and you're aware of that, you'll know this didn't fare so well. I point you once again back to how I was feeling at that time. I was just started antidepressants. I wasn't in a good frame of mind. This is more of a serious film as opposed to Seed of Chucky being just bonkers comedy. I guess I just wasn't in the right frame of mind for something serious at that time. This time around, you know, watching it again before this list, I liked it a lot more. It's still not perfect. There's some bits about it that, yeah, real big coincidences, contrivances, if you want to call it that. Like at the end, where the climax plays out in the Chucky factory, the Chucky doll factory. It only ends up there because they literally just happen to stop outside of that factory, you know. They wouldn't be in that factory if it wasn't for the fact that when they, you know, when the girl runs the guy off the road in order to get Chucky out the back. Oh, where's she running off the road? Boom! Right outside the Chucky doll factory. Of all the would-be places, you know, of all the places that could have happened, boom, it's there. So mega coincidence like that, just kind of bit. There's a few like that, but other than that, it's a good film. I think the foster parents, I like Jenny Agutter in it, and she this time around, her reaction to her husband getting killed, I thought was really well played, and it was quite sad as well because she's been a supporter of Andy throughout the whole of this film, and then when that happens, she kind of changes her mind with him. She looks at him like he's a freak, and it is quite a hard hitting moment, I think, from the perspective of Andy. The fact that he's found someone who cares about him, and it changes, and Chucky has taken that away. He's taken that away from him. He's stolen it. So yeah, I think it is a good film. It is pretty well handled. I like the cinematography on it. A lot of wide angle lens stuff going on, and yeah, I think that the foster dad character in it, I kind of struggle to believe that he is a foster dad. I've met a lot of foster parents, and yeah, he doesn't strike me as one because, yeah, it takes. He's kind of umming and ahhing about taking Andy in because of his issues, but you're a foster parent. Pretty much every child you will have taken in has probably had issues because that's the nature of foster parenting. You're dealing with kids in the system who've been told that they're not good enough or that the parents don't want them. They've got problems. So yeah, his reaction to Andy coming in, I don't really believe it. So yeah, so they're my negatives. I haven't really reviewed Child's Play, well, the franchise, to be honest. I've just ranked it twice without reviewing them, but I probably should have done. But yeah, that's my thoughts on it. Other than those negatives that I just called out, I think it's got some really great Chucky moments. I think it's shot really nicely. I love the climax. I love the setting of the climax, despite how contrived it was getting us there, or coincidental. Yeah, it's a fun ride for the most part. Getting into the top 10 now. I'll try not to linger too much on these. I know I've been going on a bit for a lot of these. But number 10, we've got Scream 2. Really good sequel. Back when it came out, I probably would have put it on the same level as the first one. But over intervening years, repeat watches, the first one's kind of stayed up there. Whereas the second one, I keep seeing little flaws in it and stuff. Things that don't quite sit as well. I'm not as fond of the two killers at the end as I am with the ones in the first one. I don't think their reasonings are quite as solid. I just don't think it's as well handled. But other than that, as far as slasher sequels go, it's really great stuff with some very good scenes in it. The police car scene in particular, I remember being very tense during the cinema showing of that when I first watched it. Yeah, just really well handled. It builds on what came before. It brings back a lot of the main characters. Offs, one in particular, which was quite painful to watch because he was my favourite character in the first film. So yeah, it does a lot of good stuff. Scream 2, it's about as solid as you're going to get for a slasher sequel. At number 9, we've got The Collection. I was surprised actually by this series, but these two films. Yeah, I was expecting just torture porn, Saw level stuff. You know, it's by Marcus Dunstan, who wrote 4 Saw movies. So I came into it and it's like, yeah, actually that is there. The Saw stuff is there, but it's got more story. It's got more character. It's got a bit more heart to it. Yeah, so I was quite surprised. It's got an intriguing villain, very sick, twisted villain, but scary. And it's also got a hero that we can root for, someone you can sympathise with, someone who, yeah, he's not the best human being. He starts out doing some not so nice stuff, but as the film goes on, you start to sympathise with him. He starts to redeem himself, and by the end of the film, you're really rooting for him. You know, in both, in the collector and the collection. But the same here in the collection. You know, in the collection, he comes back after the ordeal of the first one, and he's thrown straight back into it in an almost Aliens Ripley style fashion. Bring on the Collector 3. I'm looking forward to it because this is a really good film, really good franchise so far. At number 8 is The Collector. Yeah, like I say, the two of them, there's not that much between them, and on a different day I could probably go with The Collection. Collection's more action orientated, I think, whereas the Collector is definitely more kind of horror related. But yeah, emphasis more on the horror. Again, intriguing villain. Intriguing main character, protagonist. Everything I just said about the second one pretty much applied to the first one. They're just two really solid horror films, and I was surprised, very surprised, after watching them to see just how high up this list they eventually made it. So yeah, definitely a franchise to watch, definitely a franchise to look out for if you haven't seen them already. At number 7 is Evil Dead 2. A lot of people, Evil Dead 2 is a weird one because it's been so famous for so many years. It's one of them kind of untouchable films. You know, from its reputation, it seems to have one of those reputations being the classic that you can't be down on, because everyone's got to love Evil Dead 2. When I watch the film, I can see why, but I still don't think it's the best of the bunch. And I've seen a lot of people be quite down on it. I know CP in his 31, he ranked it pretty low, much lower than I was anticipating. It gets much higher on my list because I look at it, I watch it, and I think, you know what? If I hadn't seen Evil Dead, if I hadn't seen the first one, which if you're paying attention hasn't been on this list yet, if I hadn't seen the first one, I would probably love that film a lot more. It's very innovative. The camera work is just bonkers. Bruce Campbell, some of the stunts he pulls, the physical work he's doing, again, bonkers, really good stuff. So I can understand why people rate this so highly. But yeah, coming off the back of the first one, it is essentially just the same film, and I feel like I preferred the atmosphere of the first one over the comic hijinks of this one. Again, still a great film. You know, it's pretty high on my list. Number 7 ain't to be sniffed at. It's just, if you're talking Evil Dead franchise, I think I'm going to lean more towards the first one, which is why the first one is at number 6 on my list. Yeah, number 6, first one. Everything that's good about the second film is right here in the first one, except it takes a bit more time, a bit more of a slow build to introduce us to the world and the characters, and it does have humour, but it dials it down a bit. It's more about the atmosphere, more about the dark tone, and I prefer that, to be honest. So yeah, there you go. That's those two films. They sit side by side. They're very much the same film, but slightly different. I can understand somebody leaning towards Evil Dead 2. I can even understand people not rating it that highly. It is one of those weird films. And the remake sits at number 5. So there you go. Yeah. It takes everything that's great about the Evil Dead movies and really ramps up those elements, dispenses with the slapstick humour, which I was never that much of a fan of, and it has something to say. It's, this nice kind of analogy for drug withdrawal, coming off drugs, the effects of it and stuff. and it's just really well shot, really well handled. Fede Alvarez does an amazing job. It's one of the best horror remakes ever made, I think. If I was to do a list of horror remakes, this would be right up there near the top. And number 4, we've got the original Child's Play, one of the first horror movies I ever saw. I saw this at quite a young age. I think I was 7 at the time. Saw it at my uncle's. He was one of the first people I knew who got Sky Television when it first came out. And yeah, this was on it. We watched it. My brother loved it. I loved it. And we watched it many times afterwards. It was one of those films as kids that we would just stick on loads of times. I loved it. Still love it today. It's a really great, solid horror film. Brad Dourif is fantastic as Chucky. This is before the humour really started to take over. It's a lot darker, he's a lot more menacing, and it is just a good story about, you know, again, it's a bit like about parenthood, but it takes a different slant. In this one, we do have a good mother, and it's really all about her not knowing if her child is basically the next Norman Bates. Has he gone psycho? Is he nuts? Or is he telling the truth about this doll? And there is the element there, the fear factor of, yeah, what if your child suddenly started coming out with this stuff? And yeah, that's where the strength of the film lies, I think, as a parent, putting you into that mindset of, holy crap, my child could very well be crazy. Solid stuff, directed by Tom Holland, who also wrote and directed Fright Night, a really good vampire film. Very underrated. What he's done for horror movies, I think, isn't appreciated anywhere near as much as it should be. But yeah, there you go. He directed Child's Play, and I think his influence on the film can be seen much more than Don Mancini's. At number 3, we've got Psycho 2. Yes, this is the other Tom Holland scripted film. One of the best, if not the best, horror movie sequels of all time, because it concentrates on story, character. So many movies could take a lesson out of Psycho 2's book. It focuses on Norman Bates being released. And what does that mean? What does that mean for him? What does it mean for the family of the victims, his previous victims? And it's really a film all about how holding on to anger, bitterness can just destroy you. That's really what the film's about. It's great, brilliant film in its own right, just as a one-off. You know, even if you don't want to watch the original Psycho, just on its own terms, it is a great film. So yeah, Psycho 2 at number 3. At number 2, it's the original Scream. Now, obviously, that means Psycho is my number 1. But let me just talk about both of these films here at the same time. Scream is actually probably my favourite film on this list. It's the one I've watched most. I've watched Scream more than any other film on this list. It's the film that got me into horror movies. I had seen a few horror movies before it, but I wouldn't have called myself a horror fan. But it was only with Scream, watching that first Scream 3 times at the cinema. First time I ever went to see a film at the cinema more than once. I love it. It's great. It's an absolute classic. It's brilliantly handled on every single front. It's got a lot of depth to it, a lot of meat on its bones. One of those films that when you analyse it, you start to realise there's more there than perhaps you give it credit for. It's a great film. I've seen it a lot of times, a lot more times than Psycho, which, as I say, is my number 1. And if you ask me what do I think is my favourite, I probably would say Scream. So anyone who puts Scream at their number 1, I'm down with that. I'm totally for it. I can understand why. Great stuff. If you ask me which is the best, I would probably marginally say Psycho, just because of what it's done for the genre, just how innovative, how groundbreaking it was. That shower scene alone, the way it was cut together, the way that changed the face of editing in movies. I think Psycho has been arguably more influential. I do think Scream has had such a huge impact and influence on horror. But yeah, without Psycho, would we have many of the slasher icons that even appear in this list? I don't know. Probably not. Psycho and Peeping Tom, you put them together, released in the same year, they really did have a huge impact. That impact was not seen, obviously, until about another 10 years later, but hey, even so, groundbreaking stuff. So if you ask me which is the best, I say Psycho, and that's why it's at number 1. Which is my favourite? Probably Scream. It's the one I'm going to watch more. It's the one I have seen more. So yeah, there you go. That's my 2 and my number 1 choice, Scream and Psycho. Very interchangeable, can totally understand why anyone would pick one over the other. But that is my list, my 31 on 31. Please do check out Cody's list. Please do check out CP's list. Let me know what you think of my choices. Please dial down on the hate. I know there's a lot of franchises here that people get very passionate about. It's okay to have a difference of opinion. It really is. Just remember that, okay? This is my opinion, nothing more. It shouldn't offend you. It shouldn't hurt your sensibilities. There's no reason for us to get at each other's throats. They're just movies, okay? Me, CP, Cody, we have disagreements all the time. Our lists are completely different. There's no reason we can't still talk to each other with respect. So please do bear that in mind when you leave your comments down below. Let me know what your favourites are. Let me know where you think I've gone wrong. Again, in a polite and orderly fashion. But yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you for watching. And until next time, cracking.